As a kid, I didn't have shepherd's pie very often. And I'm not really sure why. Maybe my mom thought us kids wouldn't be too crazy about the idea of eating lamb. And honestly, she was probably right. But as an adult, I can definitely get around the hype around this type of dish. Because at the end of the day, a good shepherd's pie really is comfort food. So let's go make it. So a good shepherd's pie is going to begin with ground or minced lamb, not beef. If you've seen my last video, which was the cottage pie video, you would know that a shepherd's pie is made with lamb and a cottage pie is usually made with beef or a mixture of beef and pork. I used beef, pork, and veal, which had a great flavor. So for this shepherd's pie, we're going to begin with about a pound of minced lamb into a pan that's going to be large enough to hold everything by the end of this recipe. We're going to start breaking that meat up a little bit. Then we're going to stop and we're going to add in some kosher salt, black pepper, and some paprika. Then continue browning and crumbling your lamb until it is no longer pink. And if you can hear all that noise in the background, my cat decided now would be a good time to play with his toys and act like a maniac. Once your lamb is cooked and crumbled, as you can see, there's a good bit of fat in the pan. So we're going to drain off, well, actually, we're going to remove our meat, and then we're going to drain off about 90% of that fat. We're going to leave some of it, but most of it we're going to drain off. It's funny because every time I do one of these videos where I'm browning meat, there's always a bunch of people in the comments debating about whether you should drain the fat, leave the fat adds flavor, it's too greasy if you leave the fat, whether or not you should just keep cooking it down until the fat cooks down and the water evaporates. Me, I'm just going to make my life easier and drain off most of that fat. Once that fat is drained, we're going to add in some chopped celery, onions, and carrots. And we're going to add in just a tiny bit more salt, pepper, and paprika, which, you should never be afraid to season little by little as you go along. In fact, they've done studies where they took two identical dishes. One, they seasoned every step as they went along. And the second dish, they added the same amount of salt, but they added it all at once at the end. And the dish where they added all the salt in at the end, the same exact amount, it was just way too salty. Because, when you salt as you go, the salt brings out the flavor of whatever you're cooking, intensifies it. Anyway, you're going to want to cook these vegetables for about 7 minutes until they're nice and brown and soft and tender. Then we're going to crush in about 2 to 3 garlic cloves, and we're going to mix that in and cook for about 1 minute until nice and fragrant. Then we're going to add in about 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Mix that in until you no longer see any white flour. Then I want you to cook this for about 1 minute. Then we're going to stir in 2.5 cups of beef broth and 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, and 2 bay leaves. Give that all a good mix so everything is combined. Then we're adding about a teaspoon of rosemary and a teaspoon of chopped thyme. Mix that in, then let this simmer and reduce for about 15 minutes until it is nice and thick. After about 15 minutes, go in and fish those bay leaves out. Then go ahead and add your cooked ground lamb back to the party. Then we're adding 1/2 cup of frozen corn and 1/2 cup of frozen peas. Give that a really good mix so everything is thoroughly combined, and there you go. That is our shepherd's pie filling. Next, we got to make our mashed potatoes. Now, if you already have a good mashed potato recipe or you don't want to see this, you can skip ahead to the baking directions. First thing we're going to do is make our garlic and chive mashed potatoes. Here, I got about 2 pounds of russet potatoes. Now, for mashed potatoes, I find the best potatoes is either going to be a russet potato or a Yukon Gold potato. Either way, you can't go wrong. I got a bowl full of cold water to place my potatoes in after we dice them, and I got a separate bowl to skin my potatoes into. And that's simply what we're doing first, is peeling the potatoes. Now, if you had, let's say, a potato ricer, you could just boil these whole with the skin on and then just twist and peel the skin off later, pop the whole thing into the potato ricer and smash it out. I do not have a potato ricer, so this is what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to start by peeling the potatoes until we got a nice smooth skinless potato, and we're going to cut our potatoes into mostly even chunks so that they can cook evenly. And we're adding our chopped potatoes to our bowl full of cold water as we chop them. And once you're done chopping your potatoes, you can see this bowl is full of starchy water. So to remove some of that starch, we're going to go ahead and rinse these potatoes a couple of times until that water is clear. I added my potatoes to a medium saucepan filled with fresh new cold water, and now we're going to add some things. First up, I'm going to add some dehydrated onions for a little bit of flavor, about a tablespoon. Then I'm adding a couple of bay leaves, a generous amount of kosher salt, and some cracked black pepper, about a tablespoon of each. Then I'm adding 2 cloves of garlic. Bring your potatoes to a boil. Cook for about 20 minutes until fork tender. Once your potatoes are fork tender, drain them. Then we're adding them to a large bowl to make mashing them a little bit easier. And the secret to a good mashed, plenty of butter. Butter and salt, but mostly butter. Now, for this quantity of potatoes, I'm going to add about 1 stick of butter, which is about 8 tablespoons or 1/2 cup. Now, you might say that's a lot. You're right. If you say that's too much, you're wrong. Now, because I don't have a potato ricer and you might not either, the next best thing to get smooth potatoes is going to be this hand mixer. So to start, we're going to break up those potatoes, get that butter mixed in, but we're not done yet. We're going to add about a teaspoon of kosher salt and a teaspoon of cracked black pepper. That's just to start. We're going to taste it when we're done. If it needs more seasoning, we're going to add more seasoning. I've also had about a cup of milk heating on the stove. We're only going to add about 1/2 cup right now. Mix that in. If we need more of the milk, we'll add more of the milk. After a little bit of a mix, I am going to add about another 1/4 cup of our warm milk. Now, mashed potatoes is kind of like the perfect date. Everybody's going to have a preference. Do you like yours thick and stiff, smooth and creamy, loose and runny? But to truly know what's good, you got to get down and taste it. Mine needed just a touch more of seasoning. I'm adding a little bit more kosher salt, a little bit more cracked black pepper, and just a little bit, about 2 tablespoons of our warm milk. Another quick little mix. Then we're adding our mashed potatoes right on top to our shepherd's pie mixture. I just want to point out that I am baking mine right in this cast iron skillet. But if you don't have an oven-proof skillet or pan, just follow all the same steps and then just add everything to a baking dish right before you bake it. Go ahead and smooth your mashed potatoes out to a nice thin layer. Or a thick layer, just a flat layer. After that, you can go ahead and make a design if you want, something like I'm doing. But after that, we are baking this in a 375-degree oven for about 30 minutes. And then once this comes out of the oven, very important, you want to let this rest for at least 15, maybe even 20 minutes. If you were to like dig into it right now, it would just be a sloppy mess. And I mean, I know we all love a sloppy mess, but this ain't the time or the place, so let it rest. And once you let this thing rest, of course, it's time to dig in. Now I'm gonna go ahead and grab a big old piece. And let me tell you, this was everything I wanted it to be, and then some, and then more. That lamb was delicious. It paired perfectly with everything, all the spices and vegetables, the mashed potatoes, nice and creamy. This has to make it into your weekly rotation of dinners. All right, everyone. Unfortunately, that's it for me. That's it for this video. That's it for me in this video. Like, comment, subscribe, send this video to a friend, and I'll see you in the next video.